News Channel 8 studios, this is Let's Talk Live.
But first, have you ever heard someone complain about the same thing over and over and over again so often that you can exactly predict what they're about to say because they just are a broken record? Well, it almost seems like they'd rather spend their time complaining than finding a solution. What do you do with these people?
I don't know, but we have somebody we can ask about this. A communication expert, Stephen Gaffney, is here today, back with us, I should say. Hi, Stephen.
How are you?
Hey. You know all about these complainers.
Complaining.
Before we get to that, how about a gummy?
Oh, that'd be great.
You can save it for later if you need
but I
to,
will.
Steve.
Yeah.
So what's wrong with these people? I think certain people just enjoy complaining. I don't think it's about the solution. I think it's about getting it off their chest and just expressing themselves in that negative way.
Well, there is a difference between venting and people who are committed to complaining. Have you ever met somebody who's just constantly negative? Like you might say, they're actually committed to having a bad day. You ever met one of those folks?
Oh, plenty of people like
you
that.
ask them here's my favorite. Ask them at the beginning of the day, how you doing? And they'll go, fine now, but just wait. So then you wait a little bit and then you ask them a little bit later, how you doing? Like I said, it was just a matter of time. Now, have you heard the latest? And they complain and complain and complain. You just want to run from them. But the problem is, we can't really hide from them, especially if they're in our life.
And you have those people who complain about the workplace, and I always say to them, after they go on and on, why don't you just leave? Why don't you find something else to do?
Do you really have the guts to say that?
I do say that because I'm solutions-oriented, Mel, and so I'm immediately thinking, how can we make
when
this
you
better
say, why
for
don't you just leave? What do they say?
Then they'll just kind of shake their head and walk away quietly. They have no reply. Well, that's a good way to get rid of them.
Taken the steam out of it.
I think I have.
What do you think about that kind of communication, Steve?
Well, I know we want to say that. We want to say get over it or quit your belly aching. Or as one guy said in a seminar of mine, he said, you know what I do to somebody who complains? I go, talk to the hand. I said, well, that's probably not the best method. Here's the problem is somebody who's really negative, they really do want to get out over it, but they just don't know how. So there's 3 essential steps to actually help them move forward and get off the complaint, so to speak. The first step is you've got to connect with the person. So the way to connect is to acknowledge their emotion by saying, I understand you're upset. You don't want to say, calm down, or why are you getting so upset? That usually fuels the fire because it invalidates their emotion. Easy example of that is when a child is upset and you tell a child to calm down, what usually happens?
They get louder. Wah, wah, wah.
Yeah, because and what's the difference between a child and an adult?
Not much.
Yeah, they're just bigger, right?
That's it.
I actually think children are easier to deal with because they show emotions. Adults hide it. No, I'm okay. Have you ever had somebody say, no, I'm okay? And you clearly can tell they're not okay. Yeah. So the first step is to connect with them and acknowledge their emotion. In other words, you're not agreeing with them. You're just saying, I get it. You're upset.
So you don't want to agree with them. So how do you say, I get it? Did you say like, wow, or really? I mean, something like that, where you're not really saying, I agree.
What you want to do is actually acknowledge the emotion that you're hearing them say. For example, I understand you're upset. I understand that you're really irritated about this situation. Let's say somebody's complaining about their boss. You would say, listen, I get you're upset about your boss. And then the second step, and here's the key, is to not offer solutions.
That's hard to do.
Oh, I know, don't you? You just want to help them.
You want to fix it and have them move on.
Absolutely. But all I can say is,
not?
how's that working?
Why do we not want to offer solutions?
Because what happens is that somebody who's not part of coming up with a solution is not bought into it. Here's an easy example. There's a friend of mine who constantly complains about his girlfriend. So at first, being the communication expert, let me offer you some profound advice. I don't really say that, but essentially I try to help him. And he just debates me. So what I do is I say, I get you're upset, and then I say, what would you suggest? How are you going to handle it? Now sometimes what he'll say to me, and people do, is say, well, what would you suggest? And this is where you say, listen, I've tried to help you, I've offered suggestions, and obviously it's not helping, and that's okay. But so the key thing is, what are you going to do about the situation? Now, if people press you further, like I had a friend of mine one time did, and I said to him, see previous advice. Sometimes you just have to say to the person, I've offered advice to you, what else do you want? But essentially what's probably the best idea is you just would say, what would you suggest? You offer that.
Yeah. And that sort of empowers the person too, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Because then they think, well, I'm part of the equation here, and
Absolutely.
And what I think is valid, it has has merit.
Yes, because the key thing is to not offer solutions. Now, it depends on the profession. For example, if you go to a doctor and you say, I'm in pain, and they go, well, what would you suggest? That's not going to work. But I mean, overall, it's a great strategy to facilitate a solution. And then the third step is actually figure out a workable plan. And that's where sometimes somebody will say, well, I'd like you to help me, or I'd like you to do something. And there are three essential responses we want to say. Either yes, we're willing to do that, or no, and be upfront that it's no, or there's nothing wrong with saying, you know what, I got to give it some time. Let me think about it. And then you give them a time frame by when you're going to get back to them.
The key here is to be honest.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's why I wrote that book, Just Be Honest.
Just be
because
honest.
essentially, if you're upfront with somebody, they'll get over it. The key thing is to help them get over it, because what they can do is, if you allow that person to be negative, and they're your family member or they're at work, and you allow them to be negative to you, they can bring you down. They will infect you. For example, have you ever had a really great day and then you run into that negative person and you're trying to avoid them? You're taking a different hallway. You're trying to figure out how to avoid them, but they come to you. It's like, and then after they're done complaining, you just want to take a shower just to get all that stuff off of you.
Yeah, and they will stop coming back when they know that you're solutions oriented.
Absolutely.
And you're forcing them to come up with one.
Yeah,
that
well,
works.
Great advice, all three tips. Thanks so much, Stephen Gaffney. No Debbie Downers out here. Have a good day.
Thank you.